Welcome everyone here to Northwest Digital News. We are on campus in the Microsoft headquarters in Redmond, Washington. And special guest on the show with us today, Fred Pullen from Microsoft. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us out here today and taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us about a few updates with Edge, Explorer, and others. But before we do that, I just have a question for you. You've been with Microsoft now for how many years?
About 14 years.
14 years. And how did you get started with the organization?
Yeah, it's a funny story. So 2003, I was doing consulting on my own. I had an MCSE. I just finished my MBA and floated my resume out there. And talk about good days. So picture it, I spent the day in the Keys, in the Florida Keys, fishing with my dad and my brother. Caught a bunch of fish. We were sitting at the pier house at the end of Duval Street in Key West, watching the sun go down, having a beer, and my cell phone rang asking me if I wanted to come in for an interview. That was a good day.
That sounds like a great day.
Yeah.
So for somebody who might be thinking about a career with Microsoft, any suggestions you have for them? I noticed the lineup when we came out here earlier, and we put that on a previous live stream here today. A lineup of people waiting for security clearances, all that kind of good stuff. Somebody who's thinking about potentially a career with Microsoft, any advice for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Microsoft hires people across the globe, all walks of life, all expertise. So really find something you enjoy doing, find something you're good at, and I think you'll find that there's a cross-section of folks out there who are willing to pay you for it.
Now, people might believe or understand because we're talking about a tech and computer-oriented organization. Is that kind of background educationally required, or are there other means in which somebody could potentially entertain a career here?
I think there are other means. So we hire, for example, graphic designers. Not necessarily directly tech-related. My own background is I have an undergrad in psychology, and then an MBA. So I think Microsoft, like any other very large organization, spans the globe, and we hire interpreters, for example.
Sure.
If you speak two languages, there may be a role for you.
So we wanted to talk today about browsers. Let's start with, why would an organization like Microsoft be involved with a browser? Why would you have one?
No, that's a fair question. So if you think about it, Microsoft's goal, our mission, is to help users and organizations achieve more across the globe. We also know that the #1 application on Windows is the browser. People spend more time in the browser than any other application.
Sure.
So if we're going to help users and organizations achieve more and achieve more productively and safely, we want to make sure that we have a browser and we can help users get to the internet and interact with the internet in a way that's safe.
Now, Microsoft made a change in the support policy for Internet Explorer, and that happened a few years ago. Can you kind of explain the background of that and why that policy changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in marketing at the time. I spent about 5 or 6 years in browser marketing, and then took a year, did something else, and now I'm on the engineering side. But when I was in marketing, we talked to a number of customers, especially larger customers, who were running into problems with Internet Explorer. And the problem came about because, if you think about it, Windows XP supported IE 6, 7, and 8. Windows Vista, that came out a little bit later, supported 7, 8, and 9. And then Windows 7 supported IE 8, 9, 10, and 11. And you may have noticed there's one version that is the same across Windows XP, Windows Vista, and Windows 7, and that's Internet Explorer 8. So we had a large number of very large customers who standardized on Internet Explorer 8, because if you got on IE 8 on Windows XP, you could use it on Windows Vista, you could use it on Windows 7, you could use it across all your Windows platforms. But at the same time, we knew there were some problems with Internet Explorer 8. Specifically, Internet Explorer 8 didn't support HTML5, which is a newer web standard. So there were a lot of websites that were being designed that frankly didn't work in IE 8. We also knew that Internet Explorer 8 had some security problems. Architecturally, there were things that we could do to fix that, but that thing was called IE 9 or 10 or 11. So what we had to do really was tell customers, in order to deliver a safe and secure browser for you, we need you to upgrade to IE 11. Now, we did a couple things to help with that, though. We introduced in 2014 something called Enterprise Mode. Enterprise mode is basically really good backward compatibility in IE11. So we wanted to make sure we gave customers a place to go to. They didn't have to necessarily upgrade their applications. They could keep their older line of business applications and just run those in this older document mode or this older enterprise mode. And then a few months later, after we introduced, I actually introduced that at Build in 2014. And then a few months later, we made an announcement that customers had until January 12, 2016 to upgrade to IE11. Now this process was easier than ever before because we had this great backward compatibility. But I have to say, customers were scared about it. I had one customer tell me I was hoping to retire before I had to upgrade Internet Explorer again. But the good news is we made it easier than ever before. Some customers were able to upgrade in a matter of weeks or months. And we got them to IE11. The good news there also is that IE11 was consistent across Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. So by asking some of these large customers to upgrade to IE11, they were effectively doing some of their Windows 10 migration ahead of time because they could move to Windows 10 and didn't have a blocker because of an application. Now, everything I've just talked about is really for the large customers out there who have written their own line of business applications that use the web. And most large customers are in that category. The good news for consumers is that most consumers take automatic updates anyway. So if you take automatic updates, you would have been updated to the latest version of Internet Explorer. So it was less of an issue for a small business or for an individual, much more of an issue for a large, Fortune 500 type company.
Is there ever an advantage or disadvantage for somebody who doesn't like the automatic updates? Is there any advantages or disadvantage for declining those?
The danger there is that Microsoft offers security updates typically on the second Tuesday, Update Tuesday of the month. And the danger is sometimes when we offer a security update, someone can reverse engineer what that security update is patching.
Got it.
So the way to think about this is there are vulnerabilities and there are active exploits. Every large piece of software out there has potential vulnerabilities, but that doesn't necessarily mean there are active attacks against it.
Correct.
So Microsoft has things like a bounty program, and other companies do as well. We have bounty programs so that people report these vulnerabilities to us privately, and we have the opportunity to address them through these patches, or through these updates. The bad news is as soon as we ship an update, the clock starts ticking because someone can potentially figure out how to reverse engineer the update, figure out what the vulnerability is that we're addressing, and then they can write their own exploit to take advantage of that vulnerability. So we encourage people to, if you're an individual, you really should keep automatic updates turned on. If you're a larger organization, I absolutely understand the need to test updates before you deploy to 400,000 users. But at the same time, you want to, the clock has started, so you want to be able to test those updates and get them out to your users as quickly as possible before somebody reverse engineers an exploit.
So essentially, when somebody, when you create an update, you are in a fashion alerting the so-called bad guys on the web that there was a weakness you just fixed.
That's right.
And now they have an opportunity to go out and see who didn't implement the fix, and they become a potential target.
That's absolutely right. Most of the successful attacks out there are taking advantage of unpatched systems. So the number one thing that users can do is keep your systems updated, keep your systems patched, and also keep your antivirus up to date.
That's amazing. So let's talk about Microsoft Edge. You have this with Windows 10. Why the second browser?
That's a great question. So when we released Internet Explorer, and for those of you watching, it was over 20 years ago, which makes some of us feel old, right? But when we released Internet Explorer, the web didn't have a lot of really great web standards. So customers asked Microsoft, and I was a customer myself at the time, 20-some years ago. Customers asked Microsoft, how do I give my applications the power of the PC since we really don't have these really great web standards? And so Microsoft and the industry stepped up, and we came up with things like ActiveX controls, browser helper objects, toolbars. Some of you may remember Java Runtime Engine, Silverlight, Flash, other technologies like that. So we were able to light up, web-based applications with a lot of power. We were able to give them graphics. We were able to give them sound. We were able to record graphics and sound. Lots of power there. But at the same time, there were vulnerabilities. I always like to say there's a trade-off between risk and functionality. With the additional functionality of these web standard or of these extensions and ActiveX controls and other things, there was also increased risk. So over time, the web caught up. Over time, now we have HTML5, we have CSS3, we have WebGL. We have some great web standards, and so websites now, if you go to Facebook or Twitter or any large website, you'll find that there's some really great functionality built right into the site. We don't need to rely on those older technologies anymore. But to answer, and I know this is a long-winded answer to your question, but the reason we still have Internet Explorer is because customers, large customers, tell us they still have a dependency on Internet Explorer for these line of business applications.
Sure.
Now, for the modern web, for folks like my mom who just want to be able to surf the web, we encourage them to use Microsoft Edge. We encourage them to use a modern browser for surfing modern sites. Internet Explorer 11 still ships as part of Windows 10, primarily to provide that backward compatibility. There are sites still in use, and these are primarily internal tools or internal applications within large businesses, but there are still sites out there that are 20 years old that work fine in Internet Explorer 11.
Are there any common myths? Because there's always information around things, and people have opinions either for or against Internet Explorer. Are there any myths that you want to dispel with regard to IE?
That's a good question. So a lot of folks, Internet Explorer over time got a really bad rap. And that's partially because we had to support the older technologies. So Internet Explorer under the hood has document modes for IE5, Internet Explorer 5, Internet Explorer 7, Internet Explorer 8, 9, 10, 11. There's all of this under the hood. And so Internet Explorer really has the best backward compatibility in the business. I would say for companies out there and for individuals who are looking for a modern browser experience, you want to look to Microsoft Edge. You want to look to a modern browser. But I think the myth out there is that Internet Explorer no longer serves a purpose. The myth is that Internet Explorer really shouldn't be shipping on Windows 10. I gave a presentation just last week at Microsoft Ignite in Orlando. And I asked for a show of hands, how many of you still have dependencies on Internet Explorer 11? I thought it was every hand in the audience. So I said, okay, let's flip this around. How many of you don't need Internet Explorer 11 in your environments? And out of maybe 200 people, maybe 4 hands went up. So there's clearly still a need for Internet Explorer 11, although the need is diminishing over time. And Internet Explorer 11 still follows the life cycle of its parent product. So that means IE 11 is still supported for the life of Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10, whatever version of Windows 10 you have it installed on.
For somebody who maybe didn't take the automatic updates or just think about upgrading, period, whether it be with IE or Microsoft Edge, maybe intimidated by that process, do you have any guidance for those customers thinking about upgrading?
Yeah, I think if you turned off automatic updates, you're digging a hole a little bit. So when you turn it back on, it can sometimes be intimidating when this first time it goes out and checks with Microsoft and comes back and says, you have 88 updates that need to take place.
And 3 hours later, your computer's available again.
Well, yeah, let it run overnight. Let it run overnight. So for an individual or for a small business, it is something you should consider just enabling. Let it run overnight. Let it do all the updates, and by morning you'll have a much safer, more secure, more productive computer. For a larger business, you absolutely should have a process in place to be able to test some of these updates, make sure they work in your environment, and deploy them in a timely manner.
I have a quick question. This has to do with organizations that either have an internal IT department, which there's many out there like that, and then there's organizations that are using consulting companies who, I think about some of the consulting organizations, and Harry Brailsford, who appears here frequently on Northwest Digital News, talks about these consultant organizations dealing with companies who are going through all of this. They seem to have a kind of a cross-pollination of people coming at the same problem with a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different backgrounds, whereas a company with an internal IT person kind of just has that perspective. Do you see a handicap with a internal IT person? dealing with upgrades and things like this, relating to Microsoft and or other, software packages out there?
I think it's always important to keep IT in your essentially as part of your internal management. And let me explain why. So I've done it on both sides. I've worked for very large organizations. I've also been the outside consultant who came in.
Sure.
And I think if you partner with someone, if you partner with an IT organization and you're outsourcing your IT, they should have a seat at the table during your staff meetings. They should have a seat at the table to understand what the strategy of your company is and be able to facilitate that with technology. Because at the end of the day, I've seen it, I've been in the industry long enough now that I remember when we were called MIS, Management Information Systems, and then Information Technology. But the key of IT all along has been to facilitate the business. And I don't think we can do a good job facilitating that business unless we have a seat at the table to understand what the business strategy is.
Makes total sense.
Yeah. So even when I was outsourced as a consultant, as much as possible, I tried to insinuate myself into that organization to understand where they were going and be able, if I knew, for example, that they were opening a call center, we needed to start looking at CRM solutions. If we know that they're expanding their line of business to include multi-level bill of materials, we need to have a system that accommodates that.
Because the appropriate question for you as let's say in a tech consultant role is, there's all the tools of technology. The underlying question of what really helps you make that tool work as well for them as you possibly can is by asking the question, how do you plan to use these tools? Or what are you hoping to get out of this? And then to the specifics of the organization, what are your products and services, and where do you hope to go as a company?
That's exactly
that allows
right.
you as an IT person to be much more successful helping them from an outside perspective.
When I used to do consulting, one of my mantras was, our job is not to deliver what the customer is asking for. Our job is to deliver what the customer needs.
Exactly.
And in order to deliver what the customer needs, you need to know their business. You need to know what they're about. But yeah, customers will ask for what they need today. They may not know to ask what they need for tomorrow, or what they need tomorrow.
I got a wrap-up question on Microsoft Edge. Is it available on any other platforms?
It is. Microsoft Edge is available on iOS and Android today. We released that last year, and just last week we announced we're increasing the manageability of Microsoft Edge on iOS and Android. I should add, too, one of the biggest differentiators of Edge is security. So especially for large organizations, we have something called Windows Defender Application Guard. Application Guard is a lightweight virtualization layer that means I can surf the internet at large using this virtualization layer, and when I close it, it's gone. So I could potentially get compromised within that virtualization layer, and when I close it out, it's gone. And that's something that enterprise customers are really eating up. They're super interested in this technology. It's currently available in Windows 10 Pro and Windows 10 Enterprise. And I think with the Windows 10 October update coming out shortly, you'll see a lot of interest in this.
So any major new tech things, and I realize, things you have to, for competitive reasons, keep under wraps, but what should people be watching for?
Watch for the Windows 10 October update. So when that comes out, as we've hit on this point a few times now, but staying current is valuable. And in the Windows 10 October update, we not only are making significant improvements to Windows 10, but you'll see a number of improvements in Microsoft Edge, including more management features, better performance, better compatibility with the modern web, and so on. So lots of good improvements.
You've been with the organization, you mentioned in the beginning here, 14 years. There's about, on public record, around 110,000 people roughly with Microsoft. Where does this location sit in terms of the entirety of Microsoft's employee base? Redmond, Washington.
Yeah, I think it's at least half of the full-time employee base is, I think, in the area of Puget Sound.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so we have a good base here in Puget Sound, and we can get some public numbers for you, but that's my understanding is it's roughly about half. Now that said, we're growing rapidly, and Microsoft through its own organic growth and through acquisitions is growing in across the globe. So we have a lot of growth in a lot of different areas right now.
Very interesting. Well, have you had a chance in the 14 years to meet Bill Gates?
The closest I came was I went to a going away party for Susan Dilbeny, who used to be at Microsoft and is now a senator. And I missed him by about 30 seconds. But, I still, I plan on staying with Microsoft for a while longer, so I might meet him sometime soon.
So you mentioned about customers giving feedback on, if somebody has feedback on either Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer and they want to get it to somebody's attention, where do they send it? How do they give you that feedback?
Yeah, the easiest way is to use what's called the Feedback Hub. So on Windows 10, if you hit the Windows key and then type feedback, or if within Microsoft Edge, you can go into the settings and send feedback. There's a menu right there that can give us feedback directly on what you like, what you don't like. If you encounter a site that doesn't work, please let us know, because we'd love the opportunity to work on it.
Send it in, and somebody like Fred will give it special attention.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks everyone who joined us here on Northwest Digital News, whether you're coming to us from Twitch TV or Patreon, YouTube, Facebook groups, etc. Thanks for joining us here on this special broadcast, and of course, special thanks to Fred joining us here on our broadcast as well. Till next time, take care.